Installing the control linkages is pretty easy on this plane. That's because you get a bag with everything labeled. So we're gonna pull out these control rods and we're gonna install them. The manual basically says that you want to install them on the highest hole on the control surface and the lowest hole on the servo arm. So that's what we're going to do right now. But I think for my elevator, I'll just go top on the servo and top on the control surface. So I'll come back once that's installed. Both elevator control linkages are installed. Remember, center your servos first, and then go top hole on the control surface, lowest hole that you can on the servo arm. In my case, I'm going to go top. That's what the BlitzRCWorks manual calls for, and I'll check my control throws and adjust as needed. Now we're going to do the install of the linkage on the rudder, and we have just enough hardware left. I have centered my servo. I've applied power, so I know that this is the servo arm is right at the center of where I want the rudder to be. So I'm gonna go install this and come back right after that. My rudder seems completely centered, so I'm gonna move on to the ailerons now. Aileron again comes in very clearly labeled packaging, you can see. So I'm gonna go ahead and install that. I have centered my servos as power applied on both ailerons, so I know that once I install and align this control surface, it's going to be right in the center. We'll come back once that is done on both ailerons. Aileron control linkage installation is complete on both the left and the right aileron. So now that my control surfaces are done, I will leave the flaps undone for now, because what I'd like to do with those, what it's always good to do is install your receiver, make sure that the servos are moving in the correct direction so that I don't burn them out, and then I will come back and install the linkages. And now what we're going to do is install the linkages for the flap. Now, there's a reason I do this as a last thing, and the reason is you want to have your servos and your receiver and all of that set up so that you bind your receiver, figure out what direction your flaps are going to go, check that the servo is moving in the correct direction without the linkage. This way you will not burn out your servos. So for example, I have my model powered on right now, and what I did was I did check after assigning my flap switch that my control linkage for the flap is moving in the correct direction. So you can see I'm going to zoom in on the flap servo right there, and so half flap, full flap, and I'm gonna play with those after I set everything up. But the key here is I know that now I can install my linkage and my servos will not be burned out. If you do this without setting this up, there's a good chance that your directions might be reversed and that servo arm is going to be pushing the flap in the wrong direction, and it'll just burn out the servo. So be very careful with that. The same thing goes for the air brakes. On the servo arm, I used the second hole from the top, and on the actual flap, I used the top hole. And what I realized is if I use the top hole on the servo arm right here, then this was a little bit loose, but if I went down a hole, probably even two, this felt really tight. And it's definitely not a range issue because you can see that's like half and that's full, so plenty of travel. So I'll still need to cut that down, but the flaps are pretty rock solid at either setting, so that's really good. And the flaps are done. My L-39 wiring is coming along pretty well. I have most of my wires cut to length. A lot of these wires were too long, so I cut them to length, and I made my own servo connections. You can do that with the kit that you buy from Amazon, which has got the crimping tools plus the housings and the actual pins. These are called DuPont pins, I believe. So you can get that kit. I'll show it later in the video. And that allows you to just cut these servo wires and get them to the right length. That I'd like to show here is the landing gear and gear door controller. So mine came without any sort of labeling. I kind of looked at the BlitzRCWorks manual and got an idea of where my connections need to go. But what I did is use my label maker to print out where all your connections are going to go. So G1, G2, G3, those are the gear 1, gear 2, gear 3. Doesn't really matter which one you plug in there. Those are just the gear wing, main wing, and nose gear connections. And then on the back side, now here's where it matters. So you have your nose GD, which is nose gear door, that goes on this top left servo connection, and then your main gear doors go on the center, and there's two of them. So you can see right there, there's two rows of pins. There's a top one and a middle one, and that's where those go. And you're done. So this is a stock brake controller that comes with the kit. I will not be using that. I will instead be using this anti-side slip brake gyro, the AG63. So I'm going to wire that in. Looks to be pretty straightforward. You have all your connections, you know, coming in, gear out, so that it knows when to shut off the nose steering. And you have your brake in, brake out, and obviously your power goes here. Your power goes here, and then your left brake and right brake go respectively in those connections. And that's important because obviously the gyro wants to know. The last piece of electronic that comes with the jet is this BEC, the AF model. It's a dual BEC, and you can see it's been set on one side for 7.4 volts. That's the middle jumper here. And on the other side, it's been set for 6 volts. That's the middle jumper here. And so there are two outputs that come off this thing, and you have to be careful. So the servo system requires a 6 volt input, and so that's what this lead here is going to be. And then the other lead, which is this guy, that's 7.4 volt system. That's going to go and run your gear system, so your brakes and your landing gear. So the input is just, you know, it says 2 to 6S LiPo. I think I'm going to use a 3S LiPo actually, just so that I can regulate. I have a good margin for my 7.4 volt regulator here. So that's what it's going to look like, and I'll come back once that is done. But this is a really clean piece of electronics, it looks like. So we'll see how well it works. Okay, so here's the final job. All the wiring has been done, and you can see that I cleaned up my wiring quite a bit. So the snakeskin here is the nose wiring for the nose retract, servo, and gear door, and then the wire on top is a satellite receiver which goes in here. And you can see that my antennas are orthogonal, so one antenna is in this plane, the other one, if you can see in there, goes into the front under there and is pointing that way. I'm using the Hobby Eagle A Super 3, and that's set up and works great. All my wiring is sort of bundled in here. There's a nice channel that you can fit all your stuff in there. My gear door and gear controller is sitting on the side. That's this guy right here. And my gyro assisted brake controller is sitting on the side. That's this guy right here. And pretty much all my wiring is tucked away in the back, so that the front is all gonna be batteries. The BEC, the dual BEC, is sitting underneath the receiver, so that's it right there, underneath the receiver. Let's see, and that's looking pretty good. Again, very clean wiring, just 3 wires go into the motor, and that's it. ESC, done. These plates do have a bevel to them, so you can see this end is slightly taller than this, and that corresponds to the high side and the low side of the wing. So you need to be careful when you install these that you get the right cover for the right side of the wing. So when it comes to installing these cover plates for the landing gear, I had to make some modifications. They're also called out in the BlitzRC manual, but I did something slightly different because I really wanted this wire to not be pinched by the gear as it comes up or down, and I wanted it to sit sort of away from, let's see if I can bring the camera around. That's better. I wanted this wire to sit away from sort of this joint point. So I cut this plate so that the wire kind of comes out through the front. When the gear's done extending, the wire is clear off of the path or any pinching that could happen. And when the gear goes down, you can see it sort of stays clear of any pinching possibilities. And so once I install the cover plate in here, it's going to sort of get covered by that, and that should be pretty nice. So now we're back. The cover plate's been reinstalled. Let's see what happens when we extend and retract the gear. Nice and clean. Let's take the gear down, or up in this case. And you can see that wire is nicely tucked in between the plastic and the wing. There's some room in there, and I think I like that. So here's what I did. Let's see if you can see that. So you can see that this relief right here, this is where the wire, this section of the wire will sit in, and I notched into the spot for the screw, but that's fine. So the wire will sit in here. Oh, let's get a better background. There we go. So the wire will sit in here, and then that's it. So I'm gonna glue that in place. The plates are both installed. I'm gonna do one last test. Looks good. Let's see. So now we are going to get our scale details package, which is this guy here. We're gonna pull off our baffle, which is this guy. And this is gonna get installed right under the rudder there. So there's a nice notch for it. So I just gotta make sure it fits the finished product right there. So that's done. Now we're gonna move on to the other pieces. Scale detail piece is the set of antennas, and that's going to get glued into its spot right here. That is complete. The last scale accessories are your Pitot tubes, but for now, that's what they would look like. You could glue those if you wanted, but I will not be gluing mine on. I will just leave them off and fly without them for now. Same thing happens or goes with the wing tanks, which are these guys, which are supposed to go under the wing. You could glue them on. Surface of glue is right there. But like I mentioned earlier, I will choose to do mine differently. I will install magnets so that these are removable. And that's pretty straightforward to do, nothing complicated there. So, looks like we're done for now.
You gotta get an afterburner on this puppy.
Nice, good thought, but these planes do not have afterburners.
What?
Yeah.
What a waste.